Yeah, that's the good stuff right here. Hard, soft literature. Yeah. I mean, sort of, kind of. I tell you what, I'll check it out. You know, I'm not normally one to destroy books, but I'm just kind of big for it. Hi, folks. Nagi here, and jumping into my first book discussion. No particular significance to this book. It's the one I finished not terribly long ago, so it's still fresh in my mind. But it is The Multiple Man. Darn it! Did that last time. The Multiple Man by Bova. And I will confess, if nothing else, I would think if I were this person, I would go by the name Benjamin. And just say the name of say the author's name a couple of times, and you should figure out why. This book was published in 1976. Let me double check. Yep, 1976. And that kind of amazes me that it's almost 50 years old already. That would be 43 years this year, 2019. Which makes me feel even older than I really am. But just to start things off, I'm going to read the summary of the book for you. Hail to the Chief, the dynamic new president of the United States, James J. Halliday, which to be honest, that does sound pretty presidential, seems determined to single-handedly turn an embittered nation around from economic, political, and social ruin. No one could be prouder than its devoted press secretary, Merrick Albano. And he is a protagonist, just heads up. But is the president accomplishing this monumental task alone? After one of the president's rare public appearances, a derelict is found dead nearby. A derelict who not only looks like the president, but whose blood, retinas, even fingerprints match those of the man in charge. Is the real president, the man Albano swore loyalty to, still in office? Is this part of a plot to topple American democracy? That's what Albano has to find out. If he doesn't, his life, as well as his country, will be destroyed. And I will admit, I don't like the main character's name because I keep wanting to say like albino. Just, I don't know, Albano. It's such a strange name, and I know, petty, minor complaint, but it drove me nuts. Kept reading that name and like, Albano. Anyways, focusing on the positives first. This, I guess I'll mention the genre, or the way I would describe this book would be sort of a political science fiction book. And the good thing about this book is that it is light on the politics. It doesn't name drop, it doesn't do a right versus left smear tactic. Excuse me, it's not very, it's not divisive and, you know, it's not an angsty, drama-filled nonsense of one side smearing the other and dumping all of the other. I will mention that I think it did dump just a little bit on the right, a little bit more, but again, those are brief mentions, brief asides. Thankfully, the book isn't very technical with the politics either. The main character is the press secretary to the president, and it does discuss some of what their job would be like, a little bit of their day-to-day, some of the inner workings, but again, very lightly. And I think one of the main things it tackles is the presidential aspect. What does the president need to do in order to have a good presence, to have a good composure, the way they present their speeches? That was kind of more of the importance of the book than, shall we say, like writing bills and reaching across the other side, the dirty dealings. That was pretty light. Now, looking at the science fiction, actually, it's another positive, at least to me, is reading it from the point of view of the future many years later. The few times it talks about technology, the stuff that they would be using in theory to protect the president, was actually really comical, because it was clearly, you know, the mechanisms of the 70s, what they thought would be cutting edge technology, what might be possible, and it's just kind of humorous. I'll share one of them. Is one of the ways they would protect the president is mobilizing everybody in the entire room with basically a camera flash, and everybody would just be completely stunned. Good sci-fi idea, a bit of a James Bond super tech spy technology idea, a gimmick, but just laughably unrealistic, but still enjoyable. And just trying to think out loud here a little bit. Those were the things I thought were more positive. I'll mention this book is only about 250 pages, so it's a pretty short read. Easily readable in a couple days. Again, it's not very technical. Actually, despite dealing heavily with a press secretary and a president as main characters, it is not laden with political jargon, doublespeak, just layers and layers of nonsense. Thankfully, that would have made the book quite unbearable. Excuse me. And yeah, definitely not heavy on the legalese. There's not a lot of, shall we say, going to the letter of the law trying to hassle out issues and technicalities. And again, reading the summary of the book, it wouldn't really sound like it would be that. That would be the main focus. But when you do introduce politics into your narrative, into your storyline, it can easily taint your material. It can easily take an idea that would be very interesting, excuse me, and just bog it down with boring. And I will apologize, I do have a cold. I haven't made enough videos for this to be evident now, but my voice sounds a little wonky to me, at least. Definitely coughing quite a bit. A little bit of sniffles. And that's easily enough to throw me off my train of thought. Now, looking into more of negatives about the book, talking about the characters. I know it's a shorter book, it's only 250 pages, but they felt a little bit flat. They definitely didn't change at all. Not that I would expect them to in such a short period of time, but if nothing else, I thought a good number of characters were a little dense, a little stupid. Trying not to reveal too much or give away too much that could accidentally come up if somebody were to read this book for the first time themselves. I thought there were things that the main character figured out that you just kind of have to think, wouldn't other people have been the ones to put that together? Wouldn't somebody else have figured that out instead of them? And I think another, actually I would say this is a much larger complaint, or a more general complaint, is that not so much the technology, but the events that are purported to have taken place throughout the timeline of the story, and what the president, what that office would be capable of doing. I didn't think that was really within the bounds of reason, or it didn't seem realistic to me. It seemed to really be stretching the limit. It seemed quite incredulous. And that lack of reality, it didn't ruin the book by any means. It just made you kind of roll your eyes sometimes. It's like, oh, okay, so despite them trying to have a contingency plan, despite their attempts to cover their bases and do the logical thing in this situation, concerning you're dealing with somebody possibly trying to usurp the presidency, dealing with some possible superpowers here, you're going to try and cover your bases if you're just a regular person. Oh, but no matter what you possibly try to do, they just stamp that all out. No problem. And it's like, really? I don't know. I can understand that to some extent, but I don't know. It does bother me a bit. And I guess part of it, if nothing else, comes from the fact that, looking backwards, it's like the technology they had back then, the resources, that just doesn't seem like it would have been possible at all, not even remotely feasible. But I suppose that is kind of the question of what you expect from science fiction, from books of this nature. Do you expect it to be really sensible, feasible, realistic, logical, or you can go a little spacey, goofy, stretch the limits logic, as long as it's entertaining and interesting. And I will mention to anybody who does have an interest in reading this book, for me, when I was going through it, the first, I'll say 60 to 80 pages, it seemed pretty slow. I'll be entirely honest. It seemed like there were some breadcrumbs. It seemed like there was a bit of a rabbit trail, but I was having difficulty sticking with it. Pardon me. But I was like, well, it seems interesting. It seems like it has a good premise. So I kept going. And I would say in the next 10, 20 pages, then it started to really hook me in. It's like, okay, here we go. Now we're starting to pick up, starting to build into the plot, build up into the mystery. What's going on here? What's really going on here? I guess that's the best way to put it. So it definitely has a slow start, and I know that can be a real turnoff for some folks, that they want to be entertained, hooked right from the beginning, pulled all the way through. I wouldn't blame you. I've given up on a couple books for that same reason myself. So overall, if I were to break this down into if I were to summarize whether I'd recommend this book or not, I would admit that having read this book myself, I'm not going to keep it. I don't think it's that good. I don't think it's worth rereading. So I'll be getting rid of it in my copy. It's not worth keeping in my estimation. So if you're able to check this out at a library somewhere, if you're able to borrow it from someone, I would say it's worth reading. And ultimately, like if you find it at a pawn shop for 50 cents to $1, you can't really get books much cheaper than that. So, I could see it being worth picking up. But again, it had to be real bargain price. And honestly, books from that long ago that aren't classics, you can typically find them very cheap. That's one of the benefits of reading, I think. But I guess that'd be my overall recommendation. I would borrow this book. And I suppose that's everything I can think of for right now. If not, I guess I'll just throw in a little attachment at the end, because that's kind of my style right now, is record something and just throw it in there. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this. If this sounded at all interesting to you, then definitely check it out. Pardon. But anyways, that's going to be the end of my first book discussion, and I hope that this will be the start of a new series. But anyways, folks, hope you enjoyed it, and as always, fruit and doggy.